Folks joining us right now, and I am so happy for him. He's now a new member on the West Warwick Town Council. We want to welcome, and it is our friend Mark Dennison. Mark, when I heard the news, I want to hear a little bit about it, but it is really remarkable what has happened with you, your family, your life, just the past 2 years, and how what I really like is you're going to have a real platform to have your voice heard, and also I think you're very in tune with a lot of needed changes and things that need to happen.
Yeah, John, thanks for having me. It's certainly been a whirlwind. I was approached I'd say late last fall, where the the town council member that was in place had made a decision to move from the state for a job opportunity down south. And he and I had many discussions over the years, and we were of like mind. So he thought of me among a few other people. And, I went through an interview process with the town Republican committee. And they decided that if it was right for me and for them, that we should do something about it and pursue it. So, I put my name in the ring, and I was chosen.
How's it been so far? Um, you know, this is you've become a very outspoken, I think, much needed voice in the community. But what's it been like in the Dennison household?
It's been eye opening. It's quite the time commitment, but I'll be honest with you, it's something that I enjoy. I still do have a full-time career, but in my spare time, and sometimes it's not my spare time, I have to take a little break away from work to address some issues. It's been very, very interesting, and it's something I wasn't aware that I really ever wanted to do. I'd always thought about it here and there, but having that full-time career, you just say to yourself, I don't have enough time for that, and my work schedule tends to be all over the place. So, unfortunately, I'm getting to the point where I'm winding down in that career. I've got a few years left, and I discussed it with work, and they were fully supportive of me. And yeah, it's been really, really interesting. Your eyes get open to a lot of the things that you don't normally pay attention to as a regular citizen, whether it's the budget process or the labor contracts or anything that's going on in town that involves litigation or anything like that. You get thrust into that, and it gets your attention really quick.
You have a unique perspective. I would say that forever has been shaped by what happened. We're coming up
Yes.
on the 2 year anniversary with
Yeah.
with Matthew. Um, I know that you communicate a lot with him. Um, go to his final resting place. I'm just curious, how is that where you're broaching that what I think is so powerful and you deserve so much credit is kind of what happened to you and your family, which is just an horrible tragedy, and now using it, so to speak, in a springboard where you're very involved and you're a voice that a lot of people want to hear.
Well, believe it or not, I believe wholeheartedly that this is something Matthew would have done himself later in his life. He was a very political person, very conservative. Um, I joke with a lot of people that the only person I know that was more conservative than I am is Matthew. And there are times where I look at him and say, "Come on, come on, back off a little bit on that idea." But you know, I think it's something he would be proud of. I think it's something he would be really, really interested in. And in some way, everything that's happened to us, and obviously that happened to Matthew, kind of shapes what I'm doing now and how I approach things. And it's not even with a political eye. It's just a human decency eye. So there's a lot I can credit Matthew for in that regard. Even to this day, I still feel he's teaching me new things, believe it or not.
Mm.
And a lot of that has to do with self-reflection and how you want to shape your life and those around you in your community. So I still give him a lot of credit for giving me the final push to decide to do this.
I absolutely believe that, Mark. And another time I'll share with you, maybe even privately, a experience I went through, and what you just said truly resonates with me. What I'd like to do though is give people an idea that you were essentially given a mantle, so to speak, whether you like it or not. But
Yeah.
the topic of drunk driving, driving under the influence. Now you even have where drugs have come into the picture.
Right.
Um, we've talked about it's been an eye opener for you. I think it's an eye opener for anyone that suddenly is thrust into that.
Right.
I'm just curious, has there been in your mind, because I view that also, Mark, I view that as an issue. It actually should be nonpartisan. It should be not a political issue. It should be
Correct.
something affects everyone just across the board, doesn't matter what their belief is. But has the state in your mind made any gains just in the last 2 years or year? In just This is just strictly your opinion.
In my opinion, there's nothing tangible that's been made as far as gains. But I can tell you this: we've certainly got the ears of some of the right people. And some of those people I was actually in a room with on Sunday, and we were discussing just how upset they were that the legislation that was put forth last year didn't get a fair shake on the Senate side. And they were shocked because it really is not a partisan issue. The state has a huge problem, and the problem is not getting any better.
No.
It's getting worse as far as I can tell. There were 70. Mad was at that event on Sunday, and they were saying that preliminary data has 70 fatalities on the roadways of Rhode Island last year. Not all of them, obviously, were related to DUI, but quite a few of them, I'm sure, were. And until those final numbers come out, we can only speculate. It's generally about half if you look at history. So that's a lot of people who had perished for no reason at all, because it's not a mystery to anyone that DUI leads to death. Eventually it will, no matter what. If you keep doing it, you're gonna kill somebody or seriously hurt somebody or yourself. And it was very, very frustrating last year to go through everything we went through in terms of sitting up there on Capitol Hill and testifying time and again. It's a tough story to tell, John. It's very personal, and it's very difficult to get through. And I can't tell you how many of those folks that we testified in front of came up to me afterward and said, "You're making a difference. Keep going. You've opened my eyes." And that's great to hear. That's what we're looking to do. But for whatever reason, it never came out of committee on the Senate side. And although I've asked the chairperson for some guidance and some reasoning, I haven't heard back from her at all. I was just simply saying to her, obviously there's something that we didn't do appropriately, and perhaps you could tell me what, so we can adjust what we're doing,
Right.
and get this pushed through. Because on the House side, it passed with flying colors. I
Wow.
think it was 65 to 5 or 6, something like that. It was a push through. It was easy. It was a no-brainer, but it never got out of committee on the Senate side.
What I want people to understand is, unfortunately, at the Rhode Island State House, and this happens in a lot of state houses, Smith Hill, where it never makes it to the floor for a vote, as long as something, whatever the legislation is, as long as it stays in committee, it doesn't get out. And I think that's interesting that you wouldn't even get feedback on it. And Mark, something else that you and I have talked about that I believe anyhow should be explored more. It's never been easier between people with cell phones, access to cell phones, to call someone to say, I don't think I should drive, or ride service that so many people hear about, talk about. But two elements that I just don't hear a lot about. One is the element that we're tourism state, and that I don't hear a lot of the different establishments where someone's leaving in this type of condition where there's any accountability. But the second part of this, you mentioned the number of lives that are lost, but I would even, and extend it beyond. It's not only just that person, it's their parents, it's their family, it's their loved one, it's their coworkers, it's their friend group, that it's so many people whose lives were impacted. But what I don't hear is, how can we get to the preventive? Because many times when I talk about it or post on it, I get that people say throw the book at them, but I come back to, that's not bringing the person back. I forever believe our path as a state forward should be, how do we get to that preventive state where the person is not behind the wheel, as opposed to, I get it, even if you do God, even if it was life in prison, you're not bringing that life back.
Right. And that's the painful part, from my perspective. But, I tend to think, it's not the easiest problem to solve, but there is
Right.
one easy component to it. And that is just to have a plan. Have a plan when you're going out. Understand that there may be some drinking involved where you didn't expect it, but have a plan. And if you're deciding, okay, I'm gonna have a few drinks tonight, then that's the time where you have to start planning to get that ride share involved, or deciding on a designated driver in the group, or whatever it might be. But it's an open discussion. It should be an item of discussion right away. I can't tell you how many times my wife and I have been out in a social situation, and we looked at each other and said, "Who's the driver tonight?"
Right.
And and that's, at that point, somebody's the driver, and somebody has free will to go make themselves as crazy as they'd like to. And I would never want to take that away from people. But if you've gotten to the point where you're that impaired, you're not making wise decisions at that point anymore. You're going to get behind the wheel. But if you think about this problem constantly, and you have a plan, then the chances of that are minimized. If I cross the barrier of, give yourself a number, because everybody knows themselves. If I cross the barrier of, say, 3 drinks, and I'm going for that fourth, okay, now I have to act. And
Yep.
before I get to the point where I am so far gone that I can't make a wise decision, know what you're going to do to get home safely that night and keep others safe.
Yep. What I would like to, and again, I just looked next door, Connecticut, neighboring state. They have
Yeah.
checkpoints. I believe they enacted stronger legislation. Mark, I just wish, it's the thing about driving impaired. And now again, the state police they can't be everywhere. Our local police can't be everywhere. There's only so much they can do.
Right.
It's such a preventable crime. Do you think part of it does play into the fact that, it's not the same as someone that fires a weapon or robs a bank? On a problem with this, as much as a life is taken, or by the way, there are people who are just seriously injured, permanently
Right.
injured in their life. But the problem is, in society, so many individuals of all different walks of life say, oh, that night that I was out with friends, or we stopped after work and blah, blah, oh, that could have been me. I've always maintained, I think one of the problems enforcing it is, unlike some other crimes, people view it as a relatable crime. That hey, that could have
Right.
been me that night, but for the grace of God, we got home okay.
Right. Well, the act itself, right? The act of drinking is socially acceptable.
Right.
And in many cases, you're looked at as the odd one if you're not partaking.
Good point.
So there's a lot of peer pressure involved there. And it's not just with, kids, teenagers, or people that have recently turned legal age. It's
Yep.
with people my own age in their
Yes.
50s. I got to be honest with you. I was never a heavy drinker. I would drink socially here and there. And since we've lost Matthew, I might have had less than a half dozen drinks in 2 years. And it's just because, I think differently about it now.
Sure.
And I don't let, and not that anybody's applying peer pressure on me, but there have been plenty of instances where I'm on the golf course with some buddies, and the cart girl comes along and everybody's getting some beer, and I'm just like, no, thank you, I'll take a Gatorade or what have you. And there's other times where they will change their behavior around me, and I tell them, please don't change what you're doing because of me.
Right.
It's just, you're responsible people, and I trust you. I wouldn't be hanging out with you if I didn't think you're responsible enough to handle
Yep.
it. So, it's a little bit of an issue that the act in itself, and now it goes along with marijuana legal in this state. It's socially acceptable,
Yes.
and it can still lead to a crime.
100%.
People, I don't think anybody goes out there trying to commit a crime by drinking or smoking marijuana. But again, if you don't have limits on your own behavior, it could possibly really ruin another person's life or end their life.
Mark, I also just want to give you an opportunity to, what the people in the town of West Warwick, the way they have stepped up
Yes.
and, rallied behind the cause.
Yeah.
Not all communities do that. And I think you tell me, but I think the way, just as someone that has viewed it, I think the people, the town of West Warwick, the way that they have come forward, I think they've, to me, kind of shaped the way, almost kind of set the model of when a tragedy like this happens, this is the proper way to then enact, and just every way that Matthew has been honored and the family. It's very impressive to watch.
It really is. It's another reason I'm doing what I'm doing now with the town council, and why I wanted to give back. Through our whole ordeal, everybody in the town, and let's bring it back even further than that. When Brenda and I moved to West Warwick, our daughter Katie was 4 months old. Matthew wasn't even a dream yet, and we had a plan, because West Warwick, let's face it, West Warwick comes with a little bit of baggage, and people have a certain way of thinking about that town. And when we moved there because there was cheaper housing. We were in Cumberland at the time. We couldn't afford a house in Cumberland, but we could afford one back in West Warwick. And I say back in West Warwick because I grew up in Coventry and Brenda grew up in Warwick. So right in between the two is sitting West Warwick.
Yeah.
So our original plan was to purchase a house there and maybe within 5 years look to move out of the town.
Yep.
But then we got to know people. And I remember this conversation like it was yesterday, and it was after one of Katie's baseball games. She played baseball, not softball, until she got older. I looked at my wife and I said, there's so many good people in this town. I think we really need to think about staying here. And she agreed. We had come to know so many good families. And obviously that showed when we lost Matthew. The support we received, we probably didn't pay for food for 6 months after we lost Matthew. There was always something on the door.
Wow.
And nobody ever wanted recognition. Nobody wanted to know where it came from. They just did it out of the kindness of their hearts. And that's a fantastic community. So we can't thank them enough. And then I'm also going to reach out and say the hockey family in general, from all over the country and the world. We Matthew's story made its rounds pretty quickly in the hockey community, because when you're in that sort of youth sports situation, and it doesn't have to be hockey, it can be baseball or basketball or whatever, but it's a family. And the reason it's a family is because you all go through the same thing, right? In my case, I was sitting in a rink in the evenings, and we were in the Cranston bubble, and if it was 5 degrees outside, it was 5 degrees in that rink. So you're standing there with a bunch of parents complaining about the whole thing, and it just creates this sense of family and community. And the hockey family, as well as West Warwick and many other towns in Rhode Island, have been nothing but fantastic with us. And it really did soften the blow, believe it or not. There's not much that can soften the blow other than people just showing how kind they can be. And you know they're that way because they can imagine themselves in the same situation. Unfortunately, for the majority of them, it hasn't come to that,
Yep.
and they'll never have to experience that, and I hope they never do. But they are just tremendous people, tremendous people.
I want to just also leave it at this. This year, I'm sure again, they're going to have hearings up at the State House at Smith Hill.
Yes.
But what I think is going to be an interesting dynamic is you're now going there as a West Warwick Town Council person. And specifically, I'd be very curious to see how this plays out in the Senate. Something has to change. It's not safe out on the roads. It's not people's imagination. I share, and I've said this before. What's so frustrating and about something like this is it's so preventable. I believe it's incumbent. This is a nonpartisan issue. This is not a Democrat issue, Republican. It's about how we act as a society. It's how we act towards the most vulnerable, which is just someone that's going along, how our young people, it could be anyone in those situations, meaning anyone could be, the victim. I'll be very curious to see how they react to you this year as a member of the West Warwick Town Council.
Yeah, I can't say that I've formalized what I'm going to do for my testimony, but it will be different from last year.
Yep.
I'm not going to go up there and tell the same sad stories over and over
No.
because, quite honestly, it's really painful.
I can
And
imagine. Yes.
if it didn't work that one time, the same story is not going to get it done. So they've heard my story. They all know me. They know me by name. They know the situation. They know what happened. They know the devastating effects because I laid those out for them. I'm going to go there with a little different view this time and put a little more pressure on. And I'm going to not tell them about the story so much as what life is like now without our son.
Yep.
And what another year has done to us emotionally and mentally and even physically, because there's a lot of things that you never knew could happen to you until you went through this situation. So we're going to talk about some of those things in front of those fine folks up there. And I'm going to say I'll stop short of calling them out because, again, in the conversations I've had recently, I know that they had the votes to get it out of committee. The chairperson just wouldn't put it forth for a vote.
How?
So it's one person that we need to get through to, and we'll do our best to do that.
Yeah, and my wish and what I would encourage is, listen, let it be an up and down vote on the floor, right? All you want is your turn at bat, three swings. If it fails, then it fails, but
And
it
to be
can't stay in
clear
committee. It can't
on
stay in
what we're
committee.
looking for doubling the DUI penalties when it comes to death resulting in
Yep.
serious bodily harm. I'm not talking about the stuff that happens when somebody gets pulled over the first time, no harm, no foul, other than you're driving illegally because you're
Right.
I'm not talking about those situations. I'm talking about where somebody else's life has been affected. Doubling those penalties. The maximum for Matthew would have been 15 years for death resulting. We want that to go up to 30.
Good.
The other part is we want to change the look back law. And
Yes.
It's not a huge ask. The look back law right now is 5 years, where when determining somebody's eligibility for a second offense, you can only look back 5 years. That's looking to go up to 10. Personally, I'd like to see it like Massachusetts and Vermont, where it's a lifetime look back.
That's right.
Because, if you look at our situation, the person who did this was pretty young, 30 years old.
Right.
If they were to do it again at 37 years old, it's the first offense all over again. That person wouldn't have learned his lesson at the time, and it would have been the same situation as what he had done when he was 30. So that's unacceptable. It's got to go to at least 10. I'd like to see it go to lifetime, but we have to take baby steps with our General Assembly, as we know. So we'll go to 10, and hopefully that passes. And then the third component of that is, disabling somebody's car in terms of their license plate. when they commit this crime on a suspended license.
Hmm.
You know, if you have a suspended license and you're out there driving drunk, then that should lead to the assurance that you're not going to be able to do that again immediately with the same vehicle. And the police have the discretion to take the license plates. So I don't think they're big asks. I think it's, you know, a lot of people talk about common sense legislation when it comes to guns. And there isn't a whole lot of that when you look at that. I think they're overreaching by a lot when it
Agreed.
comes to the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
But this is more common sense because it's an identifiable problem instead of a potential problem,
Exactly.
and it's existing. So we should take care of that now, and hopefully it gets through this year. We're gonna try our best.
Folks, again, he is the new member. I'm so happy for him and his family on the West Warwick Town Council. Mark, again, you know how I feel. Excellent job. Congratulations. And
Thank
I
you.
assure you, this is the first of many conversations.